Hi everyone, I'm Jack from McIntyre. I'm here with the DNF Book Tag. Did not finish books, in honor of which I decided not to finish buttoning my shirt. I did put an undershirt on though. The original comes from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. It's a very enjoyable set of prompts. I was tagged by Steve Donahue and Jay Shea, so thank you to both of them. I'll throw all those links below. And it's Tuesday night, let's jump in. So prompt 1, do you DNF books? Are there books you don't finish? Obviously, yes. For me there are. I enjoy most of what I read. I really enjoy most of what I read. I think some people may have noticed that. There are times, though, that when I'm reading a particular work, it becomes clear to me that it's not what my mind needs, it's not what my heart needs, it's not what I'm thirsting for in life, and it's just not the right time. I don't often think of it as not the right book. I often think of it more as not the right time. And so I'll just set it aside. I probably have as many books or more books on my nightstand at any given time than Marie Kondo thinks you should have in your house. So, but there are other types of books. So there are reference type books. Robert Graves' The Greek Myths. I'm not going to read the entire thing cover to cover. I'm not going to. But I use it as a great reference. When I read Phaedra by Jean Racine about a week and a half ago, I went back and reread his entries on Phaedra, Hippolytus, Theseus, and I really enjoyed it, but I'm not going to read it cover to cover. There are examples like poetry volumes. I'm working on Mae Swenson's collected poems. I just finished reading her first published collection, Another Animal, but then I go back and look at the unpublished or uncollected poems she had written up to that point when Another Animal was published, and they're very different. It's very enjoyable, but I'm not going to read the entire book of her collected poetry straight through. So you have examples like that. The same with Christina Rossetti's poetry. Or anthologies, short story anthologies. I read a huge number of anthologies. I read in anthologies, but I don't necessarily read the anthology straight through. With Dangerous Visions, even something as excellent as this, I'm probably not going to read the entire thing straight through. Then you have other examples. So Jason Harrigan pointed out this great example of there are books you never finish because you never finish rereading them. You're constantly going back. Works like, for me, like the Bible, or even various plays by Shakespeare. Now, I would include I'm rereading In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower by Marcel Proust, and I would include this as an example in that because it's a book that as I read it, I'm seeing different things. In Search of Lost Time is so elusive, and it's this entire world that wraps around itself, that rereading it is so pleasurable, and you want to go back and find the little Easter egg hints 1,000 pages before they are significant in the text. That's just part of the delight of that work. One aspect of DNF books that I don't know if I've seen anybody talk about, and I think I've watched, I'm not kidding, 12 or 15 of these videos, is the idea of not finishing a book because the author never finished the book. So you have examples like The Man Without Qualities by Robert Musil. He didn't ever really finish it. So not only as a reader do you know that you go into the book knowing you can't ever truly finish it. You can read to the last word or the last page that the author wrote, but you can't ever really finish the book. We have examples like Livy, Aberbe Candida. Huge sections of it are either missing or were never finished. Two that sort of jump out and are sad to me are Robert Louis Stevenson's final work, Weir of Hermiston, is really fascinating, really, really interesting, and he died before he completed it. And then, of course, the Aeneid, which I think Virgil kind of intentionally didn't complete, but the Aeneid it ends with this weirdly subversive turn. After a series of subversive turns from Aeneas, there's one where he basically becomes a war criminal and murders a helpless person. And it's this massive heel turn celebrating the Roman Empire. Those are ones that jump to mind as works that not only, have I not finished, I'll never finish. After that, these other questions are going to move pretty quickly. 2, if you don't finish a book, does it count towards the books read for your month? Now, I don't count the books read for a month. I do keep a list of what I read and when I read it, in part because the way my memory works, I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember what was happening in life when I was reading that book. Like I link them together, and it just helps my memory. But no, I wouldn't count that. If I don't count works that are unfinished. That seems ridiculous. Prompt 3, is there a difference between not finishing a book and just putting it down for a bit? I guess I generally have a tendency to come back to those books, and I'll talk on one of the later prompts. There are times where I've taken months or even years to come back to a book but I often return to them. It's hard to find examples of books that I just know I'll never finish. I think I just kind of forget them. Prompt 4, what's a popular book you have not finished? The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I've read the first 200 pages a couple of times, and I've never been able to sustain like the mental state I need to be in to appreciate that work. So there you go. Prompt 5, what's a book you wish you had not finished? That's very easy. The Truth About the Harry Caber Affair by Joel Dicker. I think it's the single worst book I've ever read. My wife and I were both reading it together, and we were astonished with how little enjoyment we derived from it. The strange geographical mistakes in New England that occurred. The general, it just was awful. There are rarely books where I feel like I don't get anything positive from them, and that's one of them. The Terror by David Andress was an extremely boring history of the French Revolution, which seems astonishing that you could write that there could be a boring history of an event like the French Revolution. And then The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. I cannot stand that book, and I and then this one, I love these big colorful beginner books for my kids. I think they're great collections of 5 or 6 beginner books. This one is a dud. The single most heinous book in here is this one called The Diggingest Dog, in which this boy gets a dog, and then the other dogs make fun of it for not digging. When the dog learns to dig, it's just terrible. Sam didn't smile or pat my head. He only glared at me and said, "I'm sending you back to that animal store. They'll tie you to that hardstone floor, and you'll never, never dig anymore." This is a children's book. There's another one in here where he yells, but Sam cried, "Duke, you've been bad. You've made me sad instead of glad, but we're not going to let you die." This is a children's book. It is terrible. The Diggingest Dog. I still want to get like some paper and rewrite the text to make a better story for my kids, because that book just infuriates me. Moving on. Prompt 6, do you ever reattempt to read a book you have not finished? Has this been successful for you? Yes, Foucault's Pendulum is the most recent one, and that was just because this time I had read, I had another almost 10 years worth of reading under my belt, and so I think the last time I attempted it, I was 24 and I'm 34 now, so I had about a decade's worth of reading. So I understood so many more allusions, historical references, literary references, just in general. 2 examples that come to mind. These are examples of books that I took a very long time to finish, but I finished them. And I guess there's 2 questions here. One is, are there books that you don't finish and then you go back and you start over from the beginning and read through all the way? And so Foucault's Pendulum would be an example like that. Another example would be like, if I don't finish a play, I don't just pick the play back up where I left off. If it's been a while, I go back and start at the beginning and read through, even if it's a longer play like The Iceman Cometh by Eugene O'Neill or something. But it took me 16 to 17 months to read The Idiot by Dostoevsky, and I had read a number of his other longer novels, and I had deeply enjoyed them, and I was enjoying this, and this was just an example of things happening in life that were not where I needed to be. You don't need to be in Dostoevsky's headspace if you're, you've people close to you are dealing with depression, and you're trying to help them with that. Like, that's just not something you need to be doing, in my opinion. That wasn't what I needed to be doing, and so, I just kind of set it aside. But when I picked it back up, I didn't need to start over. I knew the story had stayed with me, the characters had stayed with me, the conflicts, the themes, the images, they had stayed with me. And so when I picked it back up, and I kind of I was like, oh, do I need to reread? And I went back a chapter and I started reading, and I went, I remember all of this. And I went back one more, I was like, I remember all of this. And I went and looked at the first chapter. I remember all this. So I just kept, I went back to where I had stopped and I finished it. And then the other one that took This book took me close to 30 months to read. Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon. And again, all the characters, all of the themes, the different like weird postmodernist jokes that were going on, the chums of chance, they stayed with me. Both these books, they still stay with me. And I think part of it was something like, The Idiot by Dostoevsky is many of those 19th century books were published in installments over a long period of time. So I don't really have a problem with taking a long period of time to read some of those longer works, personally. Anything that was serialized. That's just my opinion. And yes, I found it successful. Prompt 7, what do you do with books? The other one would be Paradise Lost. It took me forever to read that. I had to start over multiple times. The problem is the best parts of Paradise Lost are the first 2 books. After that, once it starts meandering, I don't think Milton ever regains the thread. And so it was very hard to power through because as soon as it started dropping off, I wanted to drop off, but I did finish that. Prompt 7, what do you do with books you don't finish? Well, return them to the library, put them on the shelf, put them on my nightstand. Or if it's something that I just know I'm not in the mood for, I'll rehome it to a reader who could use that work, whether it's at school or in my little school classroom library or a friend or a family member. And sometimes they keep the book. Prompt 8, do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on not finishing? So I try to read across genres. I really try. I'm not always successful with that. But I really do try to read and kind of like intentionally like push my reading into different genres and mix things up. With that though, I'm a parent of 2 young kids. I'm, I take myself very seriously professionally, so I don't always have a lot of time to read. So I try to, within those different genres, pick works that I really think I'm going to be interesting. I'll consider a work before I start it and want to make sure it's something I want to spend time with. And then of course I have exceptions, like when I just grabbed Redshift off the shelf and read it in a day and a half because I felt like it this past weekend. But at times like right now where I'm super, super busy as we've started school and all the online lessons, what I may do is read from anthologies, works of poetry, or short stories because I know I can get a contained like feel from that piece and really enjoy it and dig into it, even though I may only have 20 or 30 minutes to read. So there's some thoughts. Let's see. The final prompt is to tag 5 BookTube buddies. I don't know if there are 5 people I'm friends with who have not done this tag. I went searching through people's, and some people posted theirs this morning, and I was like, dang it. The 2 I have not seen put this up yet are Karen Evans and Duncan McCurdy. So as this has been a real fun tag to explore, and I'd love to hear what they think about this. So thanks everyone. Have a safe week. Bye.